all your excitement, patience, and support. You can hear Karen squeaking her little toy in the background. Okay, so we're doing chapter 9 today, which is on monopolies. And on Monday we started with the spectrum of competition, which is a spectrum that shows different points. That's a bad way to say that. It shows different points along the infinite spectrum of different kinds of economic structures we can have. I'm sharing the wrong freaking screen. Different economic structures we can have, and we started all the way on the left of that spectrum, which is the theoretical perfect competition. And in perfect competition, we have infinite firms, infinite consumers, one product, there we go, one single product that's for sale, and firms are price takers, meaning that they have to charge the price that consumers are willing to pay. So when you start a firm, if you open a tomato store, you open it knowing that you are only going to be able to charge $5 a tomato. Because there are infinite firms and infinite consumers, if you charge $5.01 per tomato, you're going to have an issue because you're going to go out of business right away. No one's going to pay 1 more cent for something that they can get from infinite other consumers for cheaper. And if you charge only $4.99, you will also go out of business instantly because you cannot handle the overwhelming infinite demand you will get. Okay, so now we're on chapter 9, which is monopolies, and I'm just going to leave this like this, just so we can zoom a little. Okay, chapter 9, monopolies. This is on the exact other side of the spectrum of competition. So we did perfect competition. Now we're over to monopolies. We still have one product, and the example that I was using before was if we live in a world where you can buy and sell shapes. In perfect competition, there's only one thing for sale, and it's a red square. In a monopoly, we're still talking about one product. We're talking about one firm that has the ability to be the only firm supplying red squares to the industry. And how does this come to happen? How do we get in a situation where only one firm is selling a product? Well, we have some barriers to entry that are involved. We talked about this on Monday, so I'll just go through it quickly. There can be, for a legal monopoly, there's laws prohibiting competition. Natural monopoly is, the example we used was if Liechtenstein has a gem deposit underneath it, then Liechtenstein has a natural monopoly over that gem. Continue here. Different kinds of legal barriers to entry. We talked about patents, trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets. If no one knows how to make your thing, then no one can make it. Forget that my thing is lagging. Okay. All right, so today we are going to have a dramatic reading. And it won't be as dramatic as usual, obviously, for obvious reasons, but we'll do our best. I'll wait until that loads up and you all can see it. Okay. All right, so this is written about the incentives involved in a monopoly and why we see these barriers to entry evolving. Excuse me. Karen, go get your rope. You do not bite. Go get your rope. It's back there. Go ahead. Go get it. You're going in dog jail. You're going straight to dog jail. Come here. Excuse me. Okay. So where do we get these laws? Who decides that we need to regulate businesses in such a way that only certain producers are allowed to exist within a market? We're going to be talking about the market for flower arranging. Why would an agent of the Louisiana Horticulture Commission force a florist to throw away 7 perfectly fine floral displays or be fined $250? Because Sandy Meadows, the would-be florist from Baton Rouge, has, like so many other women, been unable to pass a highly subjective, state-mandated floral exam, an exam graded by existing florists in the state who have a vested interest in keeping her out of work. The national public interest law firm that opened the streets of New Orleans to book vendors is now taking on another bureaucratic scheme, a Louisiana law that requires florists to pass a state-mandated licensing exam before they are allowed to work. No other state in the nation forces people to pass a test just to sell arranged flowers, and it is easy to understand why. Consumers, not bureaucrats, can best decide which florists are good and which ones are bad. On December 18, 2003, the Institute for Justice filed a civil rights lawsuit in the U.S. District Court for the Middle District of Louisiana on behalf of 3 would-be florists from across the state against the Louisiana Horticulture Commission, seeking to have the state's anti-competitive, anti-florist licensing law declared unconstitutional. The lawsuit seeks to vindicate their right to economic liberty, the right to earn an honest living free from excessive government regulation. So, in order to arrange flowers in Louisiana, you have to pass a flower arranging exam. Obviously, this exam is already highly subjective, unlike the MCAT or the SAT, or your exams that you take in this class with the Scantron that are multiple choice. Not only is it a highly subjective exam, but the exam is graded by already existing florists. You can see the problem. Clark Neely, an Institute for Justice senior attorney, said, "Far from helping consumers, regulations like Louisiana's stifle growth and innovation, both by limiting the number of people who can be florists and by imposing orthodoxy where there should be freedom. To become a licensed florist, applicants must pass a 2-part exam, a written test, and a hands-on design phase. The design phase requires would-be florists to create 4 different floral arrangements without prior notice of what they will be and under significant time pressure. Many elements of the design phase are highly subjective, with examinees being graded on such points as whether their design has the proper focal point, whether flowers are spaced effectively, and whether the arrangement is an appropriate size. And who decides whether those subjective requirements have been met? State-licensed florists, the very same people against whom the test takers hope to compete. It is no wonder that the pass rate for the floral exam has been well below 50% the past 3 years. Indeed, it is quite common for people to fail the exam repeatedly, even highly experienced florists who move to Louisiana after years in the floral business elsewhere." We've got a lag. We've got to wait for it to catch up. To better understand how arbitrary the state's floristry regulations are, consider the fact that cut flower dealers who sell cut flowers either singly or in bunches are also regulated by the state of Louisiana, but they are not required to pass any sort of exam or meet any other credentialing requirement. Cut flower dealers may not sell 2 different kinds of flowers together in the same bunch, nor may they place flowers in a vase or other container, because that would constitute flower arranging, which only licensed retail florists may do. People who sell floral designs made from dried plants or artificial materials are not required to have any type of license. Neely said, "Simply put, licensing florists is absurd. The state has no business dictating who is and who is not qualified to arrange and sell flowers for a living." Neely concluded, like so many other occupational licensing schemes, Louisiana's floristry regulations have the look and the feel of a racket. Such arbitrary barriers to entry are the hallmark of protectionist industries all over the nation. Legal history buffs know that anti-competitive business regulations found fertile ground in Louisiana in the 1800s when the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the city of New Orleans' government-imposed monopoly on slaughterhouses. The spirit of that decision lives on today in Louisiana's florist cartel. The Institute for Justice filed the suit on behalf of Sandy Meadows from Baton Rouge, Shamil Peters from New Orleans, and Barbara Peacock from Shreveport. All have significant experience arranging flowers, and they would all like to work as florists. But because none of them has been able to pass the state-mandated licensing exam, they have had to put their dreams aside and settle for other pursuits. So, on our list of barriers to entry that can maintain a monopoly by keeping other firms from entering an industry, we had things like trade secrets and also existing firm intimidation tactics. This is a combination of a lot of ways you can maintain a monopoly. Current existing florists who would like to maintain their share of the flower arranging industry have a say over whether or not new florists get to enter the industry every year. Because the existing florists are in charge of new flower arrangers and whether or not they can open businesses, consumers have fewer options. And so, consumers will be restricted to the flower arrangements made by those existing arrangers, the ones who grade this subjective exam. So you can see the combination of market forces, the incentive to maximize profit, and government intervention. The incentive to maximize profit drives these florists to lobby the government to keep this exam in place and to allow existing flower arrangers to grade the exam. Okay. So one of the defining features of a perfect competition, these are things you need to memorize. In a perfect competition, price equals marginal cost equals marginal revenue equals average total cost. That's in a perfect competition at the opposite end of our spectrum of competition. Additionally, the demand faced by the individual firm is perfectly elastic. This is because firms are price takers. If you increase the price of your tomatoes by even 1 cent, you're out of business. If you decrease them by even 1 cent, you're also out of business. On this side of the spectrum, on the monopoly side, the demand curve faced by a monopoly is just regular market demand. It can sell more output only by decreasing the price it charges. And obviously, we can throw some elasticity into this. But the fact remains, according to the law of demand, if we increase price, quantity demanded will decrease. For a monopolist, the quantity that it should produce in order to maximize profit is the quantity at which your marginal revenue equals your marginal cost. So again, we have this equilibrium law. Profit is maximized at the quantity where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. Okay, I want you to write these down or have them in front of you or something. Steps to reading a monopoly graph. We know how to read a supply and demand graph. We talked about shifting supply and demand outwards or inwards, how prices are sticky, finding your new equilibrium, short run and long run. And these graphs are going to start to get a little bit more complex. So I've written down a step-by-step for how to read a monopoly graph. We're going to find our profit maximizing quantity. So we're going to find where our marginal revenue equals our marginal cost, and then we're going to find Q at this point. We're then going to find P. We're going to find our total profit, our total cost. We'll do this more on the next slide. I just want you to be aware that these steps are here. And if you're confused on homeworks or anything, come back to this slide and follow these steps very carefully. From a monopolist point of view, a monopolist will find the quantity to produce at which their profit is maximized. And once they find this quantity, they'll decide on a price to charge. And then from there, they'll get their total revenue, total cost, and profit. Okay. Questions on that while the next slide loads? Excuse me. Okay. So here we have a monopoly graph. And next to it, we have the steps to reading it. So first, we find the point where our marginal revenue equals our marginal cost. Here it is. Okay, so this is our old friend, the marginal cost curve. Slopes downward at first and then slopes upward. We all know what that looks like. And then our marginal revenue is right here. So the point where those two cross, which is here, this red point here, where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. You're going to find this point. Where does marginal revenue hit marginal cost? It's right here. Okay, draw a line down to our x-axis, which is our quantity. And 5 looks like the quantity we should produce when marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Okay. Then we're going to find the price at this point. To do this, we trace our equilibrium quantity up to the demand curve. We know how much we're going to produce, and now, according to how much people want what we're producing, we will charge a price. So you're going to trace this up to the demand curve, bounce it over to the y-axis, and you can see that we should be charging about, I'll call that $800. Okay, so in equilibrium, maximizing quantity, we are producing 5 things, 5 red squares, and we're charging $800 per red square. This box is our total profit. Demand, what people want. Marginal revenue, what we get from selling each thing. The difference between these is the height of our total profit box. Okay. This box below is our total cost. Let's go slow with this. You find where the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Okay. You draw up to the demand curve, and that's how you find your profit maximizing price. Anything below price and above the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost is your total profit, right? Because at the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, your profit should be 0. For each additional item you are selling, it costs you that same amount in inputs to make that item. Okay, so this box, total profit. Now, from the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost down to 0, that's our total cost. I'm sorry that your book has this going down to negative 200. That's just to show that marginal revenue dips down below here. So ignore this space down here. That's not very helpful. Okay. So profit is revenue minus cost. So our total revenue is going to be our total profit minus our total cost. That should be a minus. Or, oh, sorry. Yeah, okay. Total revenue is total profit plus total cost. Okay, so these two squares together are our total revenue, right? The total amount of money we're bringing in. But when we subtract this pink square, which is the amount of money going out, our costs, we're left with this purple square, which is our total profit. Revenue is nice. It's a helpful thing to know, but I also need to know what your costs are in order to figure out what profit you're making. Questions on that while the next slide loads? I recommend drawing this graph out by yourself and following the steps and trying to intuit what those boxes represent. So you can see we have just a normal demand curve here. Downwards, by normal, I mean it is downward sloping. As you can see, it's a little more elastic, but it's still downward sloping. If you increase price, quantity demanded is going to decrease. That is normal, that is expected. Okay. As we said before, this whole box, profit maximizing quantity, profit maximizing price, price times quantity is total revenue. That's something we've always known. Total revenue equals price times quantity. So the box with dimensions price and quantity is our total revenue. Again, ignore this negative 200 down here. This should just stop at 0. Okay. The point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost is going to slice our revenue into two sections, total profit and total cost. Total revenue equals price times quantity, and it also equals total, It also equals profit plus cost. No questions while that loads. Not that you're not allowed to ask questions. I was observing that there are no questions. Okay. Why does marginal cost equal marginal revenue at the point where we're maximizing profit? This is something we've just been memorizing this whole time, but let's talk about the intuition behind it. Here we have some total curves. This is our total cost curve, and this is our total revenue curve. The total amount we are bringing in as we produce more and more quantity, and the total cost of production as our quantity increases. It makes sense that you would like to produce at the point where your total revenue is as far away from total cost as possible. You would like your revenue to be bigger than your costs, and you would like it to be as much bigger as it possibly can. So your book shows that this point right here is the point at which total revenue and total cost are as far apart as possible. I think it's over here, but your book says it's here. Anyway, the thought process of a firm is that we want to maximize this difference between our revenue and our costs. If we take these total curves and we change them into marginal curves, so instead of saying that we produce one thing and our total cost is 500, and then we produce a second thing and our total cost is 700, we're going to regraph that as the marginal cost of the second thing is 200. Okay, so our marginal cost curve, we all know what that looks like. It always looks like this. Marginal revenue looks like that. And as we said over here, total cost is as far away from total revenue as it can possibly be when we are producing 5 things. So let's see if that equilibrium condition still holds when we move over to our marginal graph. Yep. At quantity equals 5, we have the point where marginal revenue crosses marginal cost. Okay. As you can see, we're moving through these chapters much more quickly than we moved through the elasticity chapters. There's a lot less math involved in this. We're back to interpreting graphs like we were doing in the first section of the class. And so because of that, we will already be on to chapter 10 on Friday. I've given you a long time to do your homework. I know you have a lot going on. Your homework is not due until, actually, let me pull it up and look. Hold on one second. I do not even remember. Okay, hold on. Okay, yeah, your third homework is not due until the 20th, which is a long time from now. So we will, before your homework is due, we will continue on into the next section. So we will be covering things that are not on the third homework or the third exam, just because you have so much time to do your third homework. I have not uploaded the third homework yet. I will do that this weekend because we have so much time. Okay. So on Friday, we are going to look at the middle part of our spectrum of competition. This is the interesting part. This is where things get kind of funky. This is the part of the spectrum that is most like reality. So perfect competition is a purely theoretical point on the spectrum of competition. We will never have infinite firms and infinite consumers, and we will never have perfect information and zero transactions costs. And a true monopoly is pretty rare. It's pretty rare to have only one firm selling a product. But this center part, this imperfectly competitive section that we're going to get into on Friday, this is a little more real. Now, because we have so much extra time, I will be including a section on game theory. This is usually a lot of fun. Students usually really like it. And I think it's helpful if you're going to continue on in economics and also just in life. So we'll throw that in. Okay, that's all for today. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I'll talk to you all on Friday. And I have Zoom office hours after this. Okay, thank you. Goodbye.